Coming up on Dialogue Weekend, Donald Trump made a victory speech after acquittal by the Senate.
This is what the end result is.
But is this the end of the political drama?
I tore up a manifesto of mistruth.
And with further cases of coronavirus confirmed around the world, what measures are needed to contain the outbreak? Now, on Dialogue Weekend.
Welcome to this edition of Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Qinduo. Today I'm joined via satellite by Professor Chen Hong from East China Normal University, Laura Schwartz, a U.S. political commentator, and via Skype by Dr. Wu Xu, Associate Professor in the School of Journalism and Communication at Arizona State University. Welcome to all of you. Well, the 4-month-long impeachment process has concluded with the President Donald Trump being acquitted. So does that mean it's time for the two parties to reconcile and the nation to heal? How will the impeachment impact the upcoming general elections? Will President Trump's good luck continue into the next 4 years? For that and more, we'll take a closer look at the U.S. politics. Well, first we'll start with Laura in Chicago. We know that now the impeachment has concluded. So are we going to see less partisan politics and in particular from the Republicans? They have won after all.
Well, I don't think there's any end to partisan politics soon. In fact, I think it will become more divided. As we saw this week, after the president's acquittal, his press conference in the White House East Room, he really ticked off an enemies list of all Democrats. He ticked off an enemies list of the witnesses from the House appearances, and he's already taken action to fire 2 of them following the acquittal. So if anything, this is heating up. It's building partisan divides, and it will be part of the campaign moving forward between the Democrats and the Republicans as they vie for the presidential election. But I think it serves everyone and the interest of the American people to move beyond this and get to the issues folks care about every day in their homes, from health care to jobs and, of course, the economy. But it'll be very interesting to see Donald Trump's next moves. Our most recent impeachment, of course, the Clinton impeachment, which I lived through myself, had a tone of reconciliation afterwards, a time to unite the country and come together. We saw the opposite approach this week. All bets are off and all hands are on deck.
Well, take a closer look at the Republicans, and the impeachment. There are reports in the U.S. media that, the Republicans in the Senate, they decided to acquit the president out of fear. So what are they afraid of, Laura?
Yeah, they have great fear of a tweet. It's really astonishing and quite disappointing that men and women of political acumen that represent those that are back home, not Donald Trump at the White House, they represent their constituency from their states and their towns all over this country, and yet feel that they can't rise up, speak their conscience, if they have one, some of these folks, because they're afraid that Donald Trump is going to go after them on social media. Donald Trump will campaign against them in their states. And if their states have a lot of Trump supporters, they really feel that pressure. But I think it's time, and I think some American people are now seeing after this acquittal, they'd rather see members of Congress stand up than cower at the feet of Donald Trump. And so far, that's what we've seen. We've seen an impeachment inquiry in the Senate in which the majority leader of the Senate that sets the rules was in lockstep by his own proclamation with the White House during this entire proceedings. And so even though Donald Trump absolutely emerged victorious, and he's taking a huge victory lap, it's creating more tension between the parties, and it is just amazing to me how scared Republicans are of this one man.
Well, looking back, Dr. Wu in Arizona, for the Democrats, when they look back, when they started this impeachment now, is it a good idea at all to start the impeachment in the first place? Now Trump is in such a victorious state.
I think the Democratic Party has no choice but to try, but it seems the result now shows that they overplayed their cards. I think on the one hand, the impeachment largely paved the way for Donald Trump to get the second term as president. Because, okay, after impeachment, the latest poll shows that Donald Trump got the 50% of the approval rating, which is the highest for his entire presidency. And also, not to mention the booming economy and the all-time high stock market also help his cause. And also, on the other hand, I think Democrats face an uphill battle to win the election, not only because of the impeachment, but if you look at all the Democrats' presidential candidates, you don't see anybody that has the charisma and the traction of Barack Obama or Clinton. So to unite the party and also to rally the nation, the current policy presented by all the candidates seems too extreme to win the majority of the people's support.
Well, turning this topic to Professor Chen Hong in Shanghai. So President Trump now is in a position stronger than ever, almost 50% of the approval rate. If you look at the start of the impeachment back in October, his approval rate was only 39%. There is an increase of 10%. Can we say that his re-election is almost a sure thing?
Well, I think actually for Donald Trump, especially as we can see from his State of the Union address, he was actually, boasting about what he has delivered so far, since his accession to presidency. He talked about this lowest, record low unemployment, rate in 50 years. He also talked about 2% economic growth. And also about minorities, the relation with the minorities, with the Hispanics, African Americans, and also the Asian Americans. All those, minorities actually also in terms of unemployment rate, that was also record low, and there was a boom in blue-collar jobs and also blue-collar wages. And other, strongholds that actually he has been talking about is, of course, the border control. He's boasting about what he has been achieving so far with the war with Mexico, and also about this immigration. He spoke strongly against illegal immigration, while spoke also in favor of legal immigration. And actually he once more proposed the adoption of the Australian-style immigration system, in which actually immigrants are chosen in terms of their contributions, potential contribution to the country, and also their skills, rather than depending purely on luck. So depending on all those factors, of course he has got his dissension within the party, for example like Mitt Romney, but generally speaking, I think within the party, Republican Party, there is a degree of solidarity supporting him to achieve another term of presidency office. And in terms of these, I think actually he has got his shorthand in achieving another term of office.
Well, Laura, if you, of course, we recall a little bit about the State of the Union address. At the very beginning, there, he refused to shake hands with Nancy Pelosi, and of course, at the end of the speech, Nancy Pelosi, in revenge, ripped up his copy of the speech. Is that a plus or is that a menace to Nancy Pelosi herself or to the Democratic Party?
I really think it's the Democratic Party overall. I mean, first, Donald Trump came into the State of the Union, which is an incredibly somber, important, distinguished opportunity that every president has once a year. He went in when he handed his speech to Nancy Pelosi. She held out her hand. He ignored her. He dissed her right there. Then he went on to launch a campaign on the sacred floor of the House of Congress, a campaign speech with people chanting 4 more years, offering no real concrete evidence of what now. The economy's good. The economy's doing very well. He could have gotten up there and said, the state of our economy is sound, and then talked about achievements within it and move on. Instead, he says, it's never been this good. Well, guess what? Out of the last 11 presidents, he ranks number 7 for GDP. Wages have never been so high. But when adjusted for inflation, they're actually lower in the pockets of Americans. So he has this habit of bloviating and going beyond. Whereas if he would just stop and really stick to just good information, he could escape. Now people fact-checking him, poking holes in the policies. He says, I'm going to make sure that you have your prescription drugs. And yet right now, the Trump administration has a lawsuit to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which does that now. There's also bills on the Senate floor that his guy, Mitch McConnell, is not bringing to vote that could address some very important issues because he doesn't want them addressed. So it's just real interesting because that's, you know, you see it on its face, and people get really jazzed up. His supporters are thrilled. But for people on Main Street, when their pocketbook doesn't correlate with what he said, he's really giving the Democrats an opening. Now, whether or not they take it, we have to see ahead. And that's why at the end, you know, Nancy Pelosi says she shredded the speech because he shredded the truth. It was a night of politics more than it was policy.
But of course, President Trump is, and the Republicans, I would say, are in a strong position. If you look at the economy, yes, that's strong. If you look at the numbers of unemployment, it's low. Wages are growing. And if you look at the Democratic Party...
It's an 11-year recovery.
Yeah, the Democratic Party now, the caucus in Iowa, is in trouble. There's a concern about, of course, you know, whether Bernie Sanders is in the leading position or not. There's concern people have about him being probably too far on the left. I want to ask, you know, Dr. Wu, you know, is this Democratic Party in a very awkward situation? Can they afford not to nominate Bernie Sanders if, I mean, he wins for another state or another state?
I think it's apparent that the Democratic Party is not satisfied with the position taken by Sanders, but I think they have no choice. Even if the party really kind of chose Sanders, they have to kind of put the support behind him. But the problem I think the impeachment has shown is the nation has become more partisan and divided. And even if they cannot win the presidency, if the Democrats still hold the House majority, I wouldn't be surprised they will start the impeachment again, because this is impeachment becomes a political weapon. That's so bad it is to set this kind of precedent. And also, the Pelosi kind of tearing up the speech, especially this is not in secret. Actually, she did it in public, just to show the deep division between the two parties. And I'll show her disgust and also disapproval publicly toward the president. I think this is also sow the seed for further this hostility between the two parties. And another very significant thing happening is that Mitt Romney is the only vote that gives against President Trump. And you can imagine, actually, 2012, Mitt Romney was the chosen representative and also the leader by the Republican Party. Only 8 years later, he becomes the outlier. So I don't think there is a Republican Party anymore. Right now, we have only this the Donald Trump's party. So the grand old party now becomes the grand Trump's party. I think that's the bad thing for not only for the party but also maybe for the nation as well.
Well, let's move on to the situation in China. Following 2 consecutive days of decline in the number of confirmed cases of coronavirus, we recorded a further increase of total cases in China. So the peak is yet to come. At the same time, another newly built hospital, Leishanshan, is being put into use today, which means an extra 1,500 beds will be available to receive patients. Overall, the situation remains challenging in the fight against the virus. So Professor Chen in Shanghai, you know, as Leishanshan is put into service, you know, together with other makeshift hospitals, are we seeing signs of relief in the shortage of beds, in the shortage of medical supplies to meet those confirmed with infection?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually what the Chinese government has been doing is that actually China is sparing no efforts to ensure there is enough resources and also human resources and also commodities to support what is happening in Hubei, in Wuhan, also and of course also nationwide. And within 10 days, 2 hospitals, brand new hospitals, have been built, and that is actually quite miraculous. And on the other hand, of course, across the nation, the government is enlisting, government, military, non-government, and even international forces to come to rescue to the Hubei, to Wuhan. So that is actually, happening quite miraculously and also quite effectively. I think actually, in this speed, actually things will be gradually, coming into effective control, and we're about to see some kind of a change in the future. But of course, on the other hand, there are some exigencies and also unexpected and unpredictable situations might come up. So in these situations, I think actually we need to be well prepared. Generally speaking, I think there are 3 scenarios actually we must be preparing for. The first scenario is of course the best scenario. Within, let me see, about 2 or 3 weeks, treatment of their patients will be completed, and also, the nationwide, the infection cases will be brought under effective control. Maybe within 6 months or even, 3 months. That is actually obviously the best situation. On the other hand, of course, we must be prepared for the worst scenario in which things might get out of hand. The virus, the coronavirus, might spread across borders to become a global pandemic. But indeed, actually, what is actually in reality is actually what's in the middle between these 2 extremes. Some kind of a stalemate that we must be prepared for. That is actually the infection cases will continue to be growing, but within some kind of a controllable range. On the other hand, of course, what we are doing is actually still a battle. The battle must go on, and the battle must be, carried about with all the, possible resources. Yes. That may go on for 6 months or even 1 year.
Well, as you said, Professor Chen, obviously China is doing all it can to fight the virus. For example, on the day, when the Liaoning is put into use, at the same time, 2 senior officials from the central government are being sent to Wuhan to join the city as well as the provincial leadership. Is that a part of, people asking that a part of a reshuffle of the leadership of the government, local government, or simply reinforcement of the leadership? Because probably it is also overwhelmed by the situation. Professor Chen.
I think actually, yes, I think actually this situation that is happening nationwide is not only an issue of public health, but also it is an issue about public governance. On one hand, of course, we salute and pay respect to all the medical and government professionals, and also, of course, citizens in Wuhan, in Hubei, and also in all parts of the country. But on the other hand, we must interrogate different levels of the authorities in Wuhan, in Hubei, about their efficacy, about their responses, and also sense of responsibility in the course of the development of this situation. So in regard to this, I think actually the 2 high officials, their appointments in Hubei, I think is of critical importance. That is actually a kind of like relentless and also definitive reform and changes must be installed, so as actually the situation from the governance actually must be actually to be changed. We have been witnessing, for example, like the mishandling of donation at the Wuhan Red Cross, and also about Dr. Li Wenliang's and also his 7 colleagues, treatments by the Wuhan police. So all these things, I think, actually need to be definitely to be addressed upon and actually to be tackled. Yes.
Well, as a follow-up question for Dr. Wu, the President Xi Jinping spoke earlier at a top leadership meeting in Beijing. He talked about, this is the test of our modern governance system, and also he mentioned about the deficiencies and the shortcomings in the Chinese system in terms of responding emergency system, and also how to manage an emergency situation. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons we need to learn from this, although they haven't fully kind of contained or controlled. But there's already show a lot of the shortcomings in China's the warning system. Frankly, it just didn't work as well as we expected, especially given what happened 17 years ago about the SARS. I think the problem maybe for the experts to misguide or misjudge these viruses because this is a brand new one. This is the novel virus. So nobody is the expert to predict what is going to happen. But still, I think there's a lack of appreciation or even kind of respect to the natural power. I think compared to 17 years ago, China now is more connected, both physically and virtually. Think about this. Okay, 17 years ago, we don't have a high-speed internet. We don't have the high-speed train as well. So now we have this new situation, and the virus can spread faster and quick, and even more broader than that time. So we have to really revamp all this warning system and to be honest and also to be transparent to make sure the free flow of information. And also because I'm a professor in public relations and also crisis management, there's a saying in the crisis management is the emergency itself rarely becomes the crisis, but the response to the emergency or the lack thereof will always become the crisis. So think about this. If we have this well-established warning system, or if we really kind of heed the warnings by those doctors at the very beginning of the emergency, we wouldn't be seeing this the current really kind of really bad situation. So I think if you ask me for a measure to really show we learned the lesson, I would suggest after this whole episode ended, the Chinese government should declare the January 23rd, which is the date of Wuhan, declare this the lockdown of the whole city as the national holiday for respecting the wildlife, respecting the nature, and also pay our tribute to those who suffer in this entire crisis. Because we really need to show the sincerity of our conscience, okay, not only to the Chinese people, but also to the whole world.
Absolutely. And Laura, obviously China has learned, lesson, for example, from the SARS situation 17 years ago, to be more transparent, to act more promptly. But this time around, at the initial stage, obviously the local government, for some reasons, maybe underestimation of the situation, they acted in a delayed way, let's say. We missed out the best opportunity, probably, to contain the situation. So, what's your take on that? Do you have confidence, China, on one hand, they have this, demonstrated this strength in building up the projects like a bridge, like an airport, like a hospital in 9 days. But on the other hand, if you look at the software of the nation, somehow there's a long way for them to go.
You raised some very good points, and it's fascinating listening to the doctor and the professor. I agree. There has to be a sincerity of conscience, because my heart goes out to Wuhan and all of China. I myself am traveling to the South Asia region in a couple of weeks, and this is not keeping me away, because I do have confidence that the lessons from SARS that were learned, that are being put into place, albeit a bit delayed, the coordination with the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control here in America, for example, boosts the confidence of Americans watching this unfold daily on our television sets here throughout our country. Also, the visuals of the hospitals being built and showing the response really also instills confidence. I think the next layer, which right now it's controlling those that are sick and paying attention to the well-being so that not more people are infected, but success stories at some point to hear more of the people that are being released and how they're in recovery will also raise the confidence. And this is going to really, really show us how we need to be prepared, not just as nations, but as a world collectively together for bioterrorism in the future, how these outbreaks affect national security, how they affect economies of not just one country, but the reverberation around the world. And I think that's why we're seeing, especially since the SARS epidemic, the gravity of this and how countries are becoming involved immediately, not waiting to be asked.
Well said. More cooperation among different nations in the fight against maybe in the future new virus and other kind of threat, not only to one nation but also to the whole human being here in the world. Well, let's leave it there and take a look at this week's newsmaker. Well, this is a short video clip we dedicated to the devotion of the medical staff, doctors, nurses, and deliverymen, policemen who maintained the normal function of the city. And because of their sacrifice and their risk of their lives in order to save the other people's lives, we give them our best wishes that they will achieve the success as soon as possible. Well, Professor Chen, despite the situation in Wuhan remaining critical, actually also nearby cities, the situation is critical. Well, the growth of the number of cases in the whole country, the rest of the country, has not been as fast as in the past, in the past for the 4 consecutive days. Is that a sign of relief that the quarantine efforts are playing its role?
I think actually the quarantine efforts is very effective. Isolation of the affected patients have been undertaken quite effectively. On the other hand, of course, the quarantine at the home and also community levels are being undertaken with such a kind of efficacy. And also on the other hand, when people talk about China coming to a standstill, but actually mind you that actually social order and also the economy is still running with reasonable efficacy. So all in all, I think actually things are still going, so things are still progressing in spite of the setbacks we are undergoing, but we still actually harbor strong hope that actually definitely things are actually progressing. It may be the progress may be prolonged due to various exigencies, but definitely we harbor strong hope that actually
we have to leave it there, Professor Chen.
The turning point.
Well, we are concluding today's show, and you can watch us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. You can find me on Twitter, Xu Qinduo. Thank you for watching. See you next week.